Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would review this little video and actually a couple different videos that I thought that would be very particularly interesting. And this video is going to tie in a multitude of fighters. I put Canelo Alvarez, of course, in the title, or at least I'm going to. And these videos, neither of them are really about Canelo Alvarez, but it also is going to tie into the Canelo Alvarez conversation, at least when it comes to that of the LDBC and new media channels, because we all know that one of the main fighters that they love to hate is that of Mr. Sewell Canelo Alvarez. But not just Canelo Alvarez, the LDBC and new media, they have a consistent pattern of hating on certain fighters like Canelo Alvarez, Tyson Fury, Oleksandr Usyk, Gennady Golovkin, Vasily Lomachenko, Naoya Inoue. And if we're really just going to go there, basically any fighter that they believe is going to be top 5 pound for pound potential and is not either a black or black American fighter. That is pretty much the LDBC and new media's thinking when it comes down to it. And I know a lot of these people, they take a look at these channels and they're like, oh, well, they're just telling the truth on these guys because, these guys are big white hypes and all sort of stuff. And is there such a thing as a big white hype? Yes, of course there is. Is there such a thing as certain fighters that are hyped up and a little bit more, story and a little bit more hype than what they are actual substance? Yeah, for sure. No doubt about it, because they're trying to hype them up over that of black fighters, because black fighters seemingly seem to be the most dominant fighters within the sport of boxing. Yeah, that certainly, sometimes does happen. But the reason why I like to always commentate sometimes on these videos is because if you were to just watch the LDBC without watching boxing or just to take their narratives into account, you would think that Canelo Alvarez, Tyson Fury, Oleksandr Usyk, Naoya Inoue, and all these other fighters that they don't like, that that they're just guys that are pretty much all hype, and that they were guys that were pretty much just pushed by that of the media hype machine. And don't get me wrong, to a degree they probably were. But, if we're going to go as far to state that all the guys that I just mentioned, that they're not great fighters, or that they don't deserve a spot in the Hall of Fame, or that some of them do not even deserve a mention across that of some of the other all-time greats within the sport, I'm sorry, I just can't agree with that. And in this first video, we're going to review a video by that of Boxing Ego, and he's going to claim in this video that Tyson Fury, in his view, is not a great fighter or not an all-time great fighter. Listen, and I've actually had a certain amount of people disagree with me on my point as well, that Tyson Fury is not just great, but an all-time great heavyweight as well. And I know a certain amount of people, especially after the Francis Ngannou performance, that a lot of people will say, well, it doesn't look like he is. At the end of the day, Tyson Fury clearly is the greatest heavyweight of his generation. He was able to defeat that of a Deontay Wilder, who was, of course, he was never a guy that was an A-grade level boxer in terms of his boxing prowess and in terms of his boxing skill. But he was an A-grade level boxer in terms of the title that he had. He did have a certain amount of title defenses. Now, it wasn't against anybody. It was mainly against bums when it came down to it. But I think that most people would agree that Deontay Wilder still was one of the more freaks of nature in that of the heavyweight division. And that he clearly, at the very least, was a A-grade level fighter within that heavyweight division. And I know certain people may say, well, Deontay Wilder was not that extraordinarily skilled. Well, there's a certain amount of other boxers, especially within that of the heavyweight division, they weren't extraordinarily skilled either. Like if we take a look at George Foreman, for example, and this is why I always compare Deontay Wilder to George Foreman, because all Deontay Wilder is for this era is the George Foreman of the era. Now, does he have anywhere near the accomplishments, that George Foreman had? No. And that's why I can't put Deontay Wilder on the George Foreman level. But, people act like this is the first time that a heavyweight champion or other champions in the sport of boxing, that they've been a little bit brawlish or that they've been a little bit uncooked in terms of a skill set. If you take a look at George Foreman in the Muhammad Ali fight, that man had no plan behind his punches whatsoever. That man was just brawling like a wild animal. He had no thought. He had no intelligence. He had no absolute smart ability behind his punches. And even George Foreman will tell you that in that fight. He said he had about 2 total punches in that fight. And if you were able to get past that, you pretty much beat him. And that's why Muhammad Ali was able to beat him in that fight. Not because George Foreman was not a decently great fighter, but because Muhammad Ali was so clearly ahead of him in terms of boxing skill and boxing IQ. Does that mean that we don't count Muhammad Ali's win over that of George Foreman because George Foreman was not the most skilled heavyweight in the world, that just doesn't make any sense because you still have to go by accomplishments and their threat level, and Deontay Wilder still was an A-grade level boxer. And when you talk about Vladimir Klitschko, of course, we all know that he was an A-grade level boxer. Tyson Fury was able to be dominant over both of those fighters. He was able to make it to where neither of those fights were close. That's what Tyson Fury was able to do. On top of that, he was able to defeat Dillian White. He was able to defeat a couple of other decent contenders. Now, would I say that he has an argument in the greatest of all time debate as of yet? No, not as of yet. But if he defeats Oleksandr Usyk, if he defeats Anthony Joshua, he will be in that debate. It just is what it is. But I'm going to talk about that as it goes along. But this also ties into that of Canelo Alvarez and certain other fighters that they love to tear down. Boxing Ego always loves to say that, in my view, that Canelo was not on the same level as Marco Antonio Barrera and Eric Morales and all this sort of shit, which makes no fucking sense. Because to these guys, whenever it comes to certain fighters, and I agree with this sentiment, that all it usually matters about is whoever wins their biggest fights. But then whenever it comes to Canelo Alvarez, it's always, oh, he avoided this guy and he fought this guy at the perfect time. Bullshit. Usually when Canelo fought a big level name, it was usually when they were around or at the best point in time in their career. When he fought Austin Trout and Araceli Lara, it was at the best point in time in their career. When he fought Danny Jacobs, it was at the best point in time in his career. When he fought Gennady Golovkin, it was at the best point in time in his career. I know people are going to mention that he was 36 years old. You can mention that all you want to, but at the end of the day, Golovkin had destroyed Vanes Martirosyan right before the rematch against Canelo Alvarez. A fighter that actually had a split decision over that of Jermell Charlo and that of Demetrius Bubble Andre, but nobody mentions that. And Gennady Golovkin was able to destroy him within 2 rounds. I believe. That's the Gennady Golovkin that Canelo Alvarez fought. Now, the Gennady Golovkin after that fight was never personally the same again after the rematch. But when he fought Billy Joe Saunders, Caleb Plant, Callum Smith, they were all pretty much at the best point in time in their career. When he fought Miguel Cotto, you could debate whether he was at the best point in time in his career, but he certainly was looking like an A-grade level fighter. Sergey Kovalev was not at the best point in time in his career, but he would have probably been an A- level fighter. He was coming off of 2 very decent wins over the undefeated Anthony Yard and getting revenge over Oleksandr Alvarez. Canelo then fought him and then, of course, knocked him out. Certain people, of course, believe it was a fake fight, but that's up to you. At the end of the day, Canelo Alvarez ended up getting the victory. And, there's probably some other fighters that I'm not mentioning as well. When it comes down to, of course, recently Jermell Charlo. So, a lot of people, whenever I make certain comparisons, and you always have to be careful because a lot of people, they end up doing this where you'll compare an older athlete to that of a newer athlete, and they'll either do one of 2 things. You'll compare the older athlete to the newer athlete, and you'll say, well, personally, I think that there's an argument that this guy is over that guy, and a lot of people will say, oh, it's not even close. That this guy, he was playing in a weaker generation or all sort of stuff, when really it's a lot more closer than what people really think that it is. Or more often than not, it'll be a recent athlete, that'll be participating in boxing or basketball, whatever it may be. And they'll say that I believe that this person might be the greatest of that certain profession, or he might be greater than this guy. And a lot of people will say, don't even compare him to that guy, because that guy overall beat, great contender after great contender and all sorts of stuff. And that's another thing that needs to be talked about as well. But we're going to talk about that in this video. The point is that a lot of fans especially, they don't like to make certain comparisons, which actually may be appropriate, more appropriate than what they once originally think, just because they don't want their former icons to be eventually kind of tore down from that mantle. But at the end of the day, certain people do end up getting surpassed. It is what it is. Or there are certain people that end up being in that same conversation. And I'm sorry, but as a person that's been watching boxing for over a decade, you're not going to sit here and tell me that Canelo Alvarez, that he's below fighters like Marco Antonio Barrera and Eric Morales. That just doesn't make any goddamn sense. When you talk about Tyson Fury, to say that he's not anywhere close to the top 10 of all time and that any, great heavyweights from any other era would have had a field day with him, that just doesn't make any sense. But, we're going to talk about that in this video. Let's get straight into it. Let's see what Mr. Boxing Ego has to say.
Yeah, Eddie Hearn believes that Tyson Fury's chin is gone. In the words of NSYNC, gone, gone, chin is gone. He's saying that Tyson Fury can no longer take a punch after what he's seen versus Francis Ngannou. Did Wilder have something to do with that? That's what I want to talk about in this video.
And Eddie Hearn, who of course is the promoter for that of DAZN, he said apparently as of recently that he believes that Tyson Fury no longer has any punch resistance in that fight. Of course, a lot of people believe that Tyson Fury was off. Do I believe that Tyson Fury was off in that fight? Yeah, I believe that he was off, but to be honest with you, I think that a part of it was that Tyson Fury was underestimating Francis Ngannou. I know that he said that he trained for 3 months, and I believe that he trained for 3 months. I just don't think that he did it as intensely as what he did for Deontay Wilder. There's no way that you're going to sit here and tell me that Tyson Fury trained as hard for that Francis Ngannou fight as what he did for the Deontay Wilder fight, and took Francis Ngannou just as seriously. And then you had the fight against Oleksandr Usyk a month and a half later. That just doesn't make any sense.
What up, Fight World?
But don't get it wrong. Do I believe that Tyson Fury no longer has any punch resistance? I don't think so. Now, there's certain people that, overall, also said in my comment section that I think that Tyson Fury's done. I think that he's washed up. I don't think that he's washed up. I just think that he, at least, we'll see what happens in the Oleksandr Usyk fight. But I'm not going to go that far as of yet. I still think Tyson Fury looks relatively, cognizant. I just think that he was majorly surprised by a fighter overall that he underestimated, heavily underestimated, and probably did not train as hard for some of his other fights, when it comes down to it against some of his other fights, and the guy turned out to be a phenomenal athlete with a little bit more skill than what we all thought he would have. It just is what it is. So in my view, it's really not that big of a deal. And I understand Fury that he had a very rough time against an MMA fighter. But if we're also going to be real about this, Francis Ngannou is not just a regular MMA fighter. He's also a guy that's around 270 pounds, 6'4", when it comes down to it, and allegedly has the hardest punches on that of the planet Earth. Now, I don't know how confirmed that actually is. I know that allegedly he has the record. I don't know how that would actually compare to that of Deontay Wilder and some of the other guys. But I'm not here trying to tear down Tyson Fury's whole career just because of that one performance. To me, that doesn't want to make any sense. Because if you were to say that, then that would mean that Deontay Wilder and that of Vladimir Klitschko, that they were never shit. And I'm sorry, but I just can't ever allege that.
It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing, the best in the business here. Now, Eddie Hearn just did a recent interview, and he was weighing in on the Tyson Fury Ngannou performance. And I'm just going to paraphrase here, but in that interview, Eddie Hearn has basically said that Tyson Fury's chin is shot, damaged goods. He also previously stated that he thought Ngannou beat Tyson Fury, and overall Fury didn't look good. In this interview, he says,
I agree. Tyson Fury once again did not look good in the fight. He looked like he underestimated his opponent. He looked like he did not know how to properly set up a certain amount of his shots. He looked like a guy that didn't have that great of a game plan, and that his game plan was basically just to play with him and pretty much, eventually knock him out. I think that he thought that Francis Ngannou was just going to be a pushover. I could tell by the first round when he went in there and tried to launch a right hand straight down the pipe, and then he felt a return left or right by that of Francis Ngannou. He felt the power, and immediately Tyson Fury's demeanor changed. He knew that Francis was a little bit more real overall than what he thought he was going to be. And the fact that he was parrying his jab, and the fact that he was doing some other pretty decent counters and defensive moves, and especially after that knockdown in the third round, it pretty much took Tyson Fury completely off balance. But I don't think that he had great conditioning in this fight. Now in the third Deontay Wilder fight, it didn't really look like he had super great conditioning either. But at least it was good enough because, he was at least able to last, with some solid punches from Deontay Wilder. And he lasted and was able to knock out Deontay in the 11th. But in this fight, it was the 9th and 10th round, and Tyson Fury was panting. Tyson Fury was, he did not look to have the same level of conditioning at all.
Tyson Fury's chin ain't what it used to be.
With fast signs, Drew's signature flavor into every...
Right? And I think that's an interesting comment, and it's similar to a theory that I had. And people, I think, often sleep on this. Deontay Wilder, the amount of power he has, despite Fury getting long counts and knocked out and then somehow waking up and stuff, Fury still wins.
And Boxing Ego said somehow waking up and stuff. So basically, what is he alleging? That I thought that Tyson Fury should have been knocked out in the first fight. Which no, he shouldn't have, because Tyson Fury was up at about 9.5, to 9.9 seconds. He was up around there. So people are trying to act like it was a Buster Douglas versus Mike Tyson long count. It wasn't when it came down to it. But once again, these guys are still very pissed off and upset that their brother Deontay Wilder, ended up getting knocked out. So it is what it is.
Do that. And I can explain.
And just to answer the question, do I believe that Tyson Fury, do I think that his chin is shot? I don't think that his chin is shot. I think that if his chin was shot, that he would have got knocked out in that fight, because Francis Ngannou had 2 really good rounds. There was the 3rd round, overall, where he knocked him down, of course. And then there was the 8th round, which Tyson Fury was actually winning in the beginning. But then in the second half, I don't know what the hell happened. Fury was just trying to lean in on him, and maybe he was trying to, grapple, or not grapple with him, but maybe trying to tie him up, or maybe trying to make it more confusing. But Francis Ngannou was able to get out of that, and he was able to land a bunch of blows, And I think that if he was completely shot, that he would have got knocked out in that round. But, he didn't. I just think that Tyson Fury, that he's another one of these fighters that, he has a very good chin, but I don't think that it's made out of granite. People, of course, a lot of the time say that Tyson Fury has an amazing chin. It isn't really that Tyson Fury can't get knocked down. It's just that he recovers very well from the shots. And to be honest with you, that's probably more important than never being knocked down anyway. So it is what it is. It's not like Tyson Fury. It's not like he never been knocked down before. He was knocked down by Steve Cunningham. He was knocked down by that of Deontay Wilder multiple times. And there's probably a couple other fighters that I can't remember. But just is what it is. That's just how Fury is.
So what I mean is...
But the more important thing, of course, is that Fury always gets back up, and he always ends up winning the fight.
You had X amount of rounds with Deontay Wilder. I don't know every round that happened. One fight went 12 rounds. Second.
Well, I can tell you every single fight. I remember them clearly, because I did a lot of videos because of the narratives that were being proposed overall about all 3 fights. The first fight went 12 rounds, and it was proposed a draw, which it never should have been, by the way. Once again, probably one of the biggest highway robberies of the past 10 plus years. Somehow Wilder was gifted a draw decision. But none of these, pro blackity black channels, none of them ever talk about that. How Wilder pretty much got embarrassed throughout that whole entire fight. And somehow he ended up getting a draw. And yes, he did end up getting 2 knockdowns. But just because you end up getting 2 knockdowns in a fight doesn't mean that you end up deserving a draw, when Tyson Fury pretty much wins 8 to 9 rounds out of that whole entire fight. And clearly, there was very little swing rounds in that fight.
The fight went.
And the second fight, of course, went 7 rounds. I believe that went 7 rounds. And then the third fight went 11.
X amount of rounds, the 7th or 9th or whatever it was. And then you had the third fight. But in those 3 fights, Fury was dropped like 5 times by one man.
Well, Tyson Fury was dropped 2 times in the first fight against Deontay Wilder, because I think that he still needed some polishing against, with a superior coach. The second fight, he was not dropped at all, and then the third fight, he was dropped a couple times by that of Deontay Wilder. Once, I believe, in the fourth, or actually, no, both times in the 4th round. Both times in the 4th round. So that's what ended up happening there.
Take Wilder. So Wilder, despite losing 2 and having a draw on the other one in the first fight, Wilder put a lot of mileage on Tyson Fury's chin and took a lot out of him, especially with them long counts. Like, some of them counts was long as hell.
No, they really weren't, but, it is what it is.
Right? So...
Now, if we're talking about the third fight, there were certain counts that were a bit longer. But what these guys seem to never talk about is that Deontay Wilder was getting the same counts from Sergio Mora, I believe. Or not Sergio Mora, whatever the dude's name was. I think Jose Mora, whatever the referee's name was. It was the same amount of time for both fighters. But, since there's such a victimization mentality, the only thing that they can focus on is that, their favorite black fighter ended up losing.
That's how a chin eventually becomes cracked. So I don't know that Eddie Hearn is very far off with his assessment. And although Eddie Hearn might not credit Wilder for it, I'm going to give, oh my God, Deontay the Bronze Bomber Wilder from Tuscaloosa, Alabama to this day. I'm going to give Wilder the credit because I think it's single-handedly Wilder. Fury's been dropped earlier in his career, Steve Cunningham and stuff like that. But when Wilder dropped him, he was seriously hurt every single time. Like, he was rocked. You know what I mean? So when Francis Ngannou got to him, it's almost like a meat tenderizer. If you like butterfly some chicken and then you pull out the meat tenderizer or a steak and you just hammer away at it, you're hammering the muscle and the tendons, all this stuff, and flattening out that piece of chicken or flattening out that steak. So when you try to sear it, it becomes easier because it's flat. It's like a flattened piece of chicken, right? As opposed to if you just put a whole chicken breast on the grill. And I think Wilder definitely tenderized Tyson Fury, with that punching power. So Ngannou, that was not a...
I think that both fighters had an impact on each other to a degree, but once again, do I believe that Tyson Fury is a complete shot fighter? I'm not going to go that far. Once again, I need to see him in his next couple fights, maybe in the Usyk fight. Maybe if Usyk just completely dominates Fury and knocks him out, and Fury isn't, competitive whatsoever, then I would probably, say, okay, Fury doesn't really look quite the same as what he once did. And certain people might say, well, who knows? Maybe Usyk is just that good, but I'm not quite sure if Usyk has the level of power to keep Fury off of him the whole entire time. But we'll see what happens in that fight. But anyways, once again, I don't think that Fury is really a shot fighter. I just think it is that Fury, I don't think that he took Ngannou very seriously. I don't think he trained quite as intensely. I think that he trained, but I don't think that he trained quite as intensely overall for that of a Francis Ngannou. On top of that, Ngannou, he surprised Fury with some of the moves that he did know. On top of that, he's a phenomenal athlete with a lot of raw power. He got knocked down. It happens, especially when you don't take your opponent very seriously. And he's very lucky that he did not end up losing that fight. I gave Fury the fight, but had they given it to Francis Ngannou, of course you couldn't have been mad either, because it was a fight that could have went either way.
Good performance from Tyson Fury. You got to give credit to Ngannou as well, because he has natural gifts like his strength and power. I mean, he got hit with a vicious, and I do mean vicious, elbow, and he just walked through it and ate it and, got back to square business. So I respect Ngannou. But ultimately, I do think Wilder still has something to do with Tyson Fury being where he's at now. And I've said this before, Tyson Fury...
Business owners know that a little of anything can go a long way. That's why U.S. Cellular is offering small business...
a bit of an anomaly. He's very people... I didn't understand when people were trying to rush and compare him to historic greats like Lennox Lewis and, he's top 10 pound for pound. And
Right, but aren't you the same dude that put Deontay Wilder top 10 pound for pound? It's no offense, but this is how you can tell the difference between a hater and someone that's giving objective and logical criticism. Because their points will make no fucking sense whatsoever whenever they compare. Ego is pretty much grasping at straws whenever it comes to Canelo or Tyson Fury. He says with Canelo Alvarez that, oh, I can't have Canelo up on the same level as these guys, blah, blah, blah. But then he talks about Tyson Fury, and all his points are is that, oh, well, Tyson Fury, he can't be, the level of those guys because he gets knocked down too much. And, overall, he gets knocked down and all sorts of stuff. He didn't have that great of a performance against this guy. Well, if we're going to go by those standards, no problem. But then why the hell are you putting fighters like Marquez, Eric Morales, and Marco Antonio Barrera over Canelo Alvarez? Because Canelo's never even been knocked down, let alone knocked out. So why the hell are you putting fighters like Morales, Barrera, who have been knocked out multiple times, by the way, and Juan Manuel Marquez, who got knocked down a dozen times in his career? Why the hell are you putting those fighters above Canelo if we're going by those standards? That makes no sense. And yes, Fury is a top 10 pound for pound fighter, and in my view, he is still within my top 5 pound for pound. Now, if you were to put him a little bit lower after the performance against Francis Ngannou, I couldn't be mad at it. But once again, Fury is an exceptional fighter when he's at his best. Remember, these are the same guys that claim that Wilder was a top 5 to top 10 pound for pound fighter.
The greatest heavyweight in the top 5 and 10 of all. I never seen that. You never heard me on my channel suggest.
And you're never going to say it because Tyson Fury is a Caucasian fighter. If Tyson Fury once again was Tyrone Fury and he was from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, or Memphis, Tennessee, or Atlanta, Georgia, and he was black, when it came down to it. These guys will be saying that, Tyson Fury is up there with almost any of the heavyweights. Now, in terms of the greatest of all time conversation, do I believe that Fury is quite there with Ali, or some of those other guys yet? Not quite yet, but if he ends up defeating that of Oleksandr Usyk, and Anthony Joshua, he will have his place there. And I know a lot of people that are going to disagree with me. They'll say, oh, you can't even compare. Listen, at the end of the day, when we talk about all the all-time greats, especially for heavyweights, how many of them really have like a dozen all-time great wins? Like, people try to act like Muhammad Ali just has like 10 complete A-grade level wins. The great wins of his era were Floyd Patterson, Sonny Liston, George Foreman, Joe Frazier, and to be honest with you, that's really about it. Because is Ken Norton really a great fighter? He's a good fighter, but is he a great fighter? When it comes down to it, I want to say that he's a great fighter. He's a guy that pretty much lost a lot of the big fights in his career, including a George Foreman, I believe, Jerry Cooney, a certain amount of the other fights. Not saying that he was not good, but I would not say that he's great. Joe Bugner, he wasn't great. Ernie Shavers, very good fighter, never great. I don't even believe that he won a title in his career. So at the end of the day, we can say all this stuff that we want to, but when we talk about comparisons between a fighter, I wouldn't quite put Fury on the same level as Ali just because of the accomplishments. And Ali still has the 4 great wins of his era, probably compared to Tyson Fury's 2. But if Fury does get 2 other great wins, 2 against 2 people that are clearly going to be in the Hall of Fame, over Anthony Joshua and Usyk, and if he continues fighting and gets to win over Andrew Ruiz, then yes, there will be a clear discussion that Fury deserves to be in that conversation.
And
I have certain people that tell me, all the time that, oh, if you put Fury or Canelo or some of these other fighters in another generation, they get destroyed. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. You're talking about Tyson Fury that was able to embarrass both Deontay Wilder and Vladimir Klitschko. He's undefeated. He's been able to defeat a multitude of styles. He was also able to defeat Dillian White. It is what it is. And if we're also going to go there, people can talk about the Francis Ngannou fight all they want to, that it was a low performance, and I get it, and that Fury has probably had other performances that weren't super duper great. But at the end of the day, if we're also going to go there, it isn't like Muhammad Ali and Lennox Lewis at times also did not have their low points. And, and I had this dude in my comment section, saying overall, like, it doesn't matter if you're supposed to be, top 5 or, as high as people say Tyson Fury is, you're not supposed to have that type of a performance against Francis Ngannou. Even if you underestimate, I was like, okay, well, if you want to go by those standards, I have no problem with it. But what people seem to forget is that Muhammad Ali, he was not completely flawless throughout his career. He did lose one fight to Joe Frazier. When it came down to it, he did lose to Ken Norton, who was not an all-time great fighter, by the way, never was. He also lost to a 6-0 Leon Spinks, who ended up at about 24-17 at the end of his career. Okay, now that, to be fair, that was when Muhammad Ali was a little bit older, and his legs didn't work as good. But, once again, if we're going to go by these standards, and judge off of just one performance, then okay, let's do it with all the fighters. Because if we're also going to go to it, Lennox Lewis, Lewis was a great fighter, but if we're also going to talk about it, what all-time great wins does Lennox Lewis really have besides Mike Tyson and that overall of Evander Holyfield? What other all-time great fighters did he really fight of his era? Because Andrew Galata is not an all-time great fighter. David Tua is not an all-time great fighter. All right? Some of these other guys, they're not all-time great fighters. And I don't blame that on Lennox Lewis, But if we're also going to go there, he did have 2 losses in his career against fighters that he probably should have not lost to. That did not happen to Tyson Fury. Lennox Lewis got knocked out by Oliver McCall. He got knocked out by that of Hassan Rahman. Neither of those fights he should have lost, but he ended up getting knocked out clean, cold in both of those fights. It just is what it is. But you don't hear any of these channels say, oh, well, Lennox Lewis, he can't be compared to Fury because Fury never got knocked out like that. Like, you don't ever hear that. So once again, if you want to go by those standards, it's up to you, but I just don't think that they're the best of standards.
I think with Fury, given his performances, he's too hit or miss. I can never give him that. You know what I mean? Because,
well, you're never going to give him that overall because Tyson Fury is a Caucasian fighter. And once again, the main goal of these types of channels, because their worst nightmare is to see Canelo, Fury, Usyk, these types of fighters within the top 10 conversation one day. They don't want that. So when Ego is saying that I can never give Tyson Fury that mantle, all this other stuff, no problem. So then does that mean that Lennox Lewis is not debatably the greatest heavyweight of all time because he got knocked out by two fighters that were known for losing some of the bigger fights in their career? Because that never happened to Tyson Fury. So does that place Tyson Fury immediately over that of Lennox Lewis? You know, because he ended up getting cold cocked in two of his fights. He ended up getting knocked out cold in two of his fights against fighters that were not great fighters, by the way. Were not all-time great fighters. They were good contenders, but they were not all-time great fighters, period. It is what it is. You know, so you can say that all you want to, but at the end of the day, Fury was dominant over Klitschko. He was dominant over Wilder. He was dominant over Dillian White. He was dominant over Derek Chisora. Now, there's a couple of other performances that, of course, he was a little bit, you know, not as great, like against John McDermott earlier in his career when he was still learning as a fighter. Otto Wallin, of course, he was not the best, you know, when it came down to it. And, you know, against Francis Ngannou, we all know that. But once again, let's stop pretending that some of these fighters, that they were just perfect or did not have their lowlights once again in their career. Because if we're going to go there, you know, once again, Lennox Lewis, overall, he had his low spots. He got knocked out twice against fighters that were never a champion until they became champion by knocking him out.
If you were 18, 19, you didn't take your career serious, and then that was like a phase, and you got real disciplined, and all your fights look good after that, maybe. Because people go through little phases, and I've been through mad different phases, like Mason, on my way, right? People go through these phases and oftentimes improve. But Tyson Fury is a 30-plus-year-old man. He's had a double-digit career over 10 years, and throughout his whole career, it's been spotty. It's been very spotty. So that's just who he is.
Well, it's been spotty, or it's, once again, it's just that at times he doesn't have good performances here and there. You know, like Boxing Ego tries to act like, you know, Tyson Fury has several controversial decisions in his career. Every single time that Tyson Fury gets knocked down in a fight, he always comes back stronger, and he usually ends up knocking him out.
Great way of looking at how I move through life.
And I mean, this type of behavior dates all the way back. If you look it up, Tyson Fury fought a guy named John McDermott, and everybody thought that it was highway robbery and that John McDermott truly beat Tyson Fury. But people over time, or new fans, they don't either know about it, or they forget about it, or they choose to sweep it under the rug and forget about these things, but not your boy Ego.
Right, so you're going to mention a fight that probably was about, you know, over 10 years ago when Tyson Fury was still an inexperienced fighter, and that just takes away from all the stuff that he did in his career, so he can never be compared to the greatest of all time, even if he beats Usyk and Anthony Joshua in a clear fashion. You know, once again, that's how you know the difference between someone with constructive criticism and a hater, because it will never matter how much they accomplish. They're never going to put them on that level, and Ego's never going to put Canelo on that level either. You know, they always have to keep them at a relative distance because they know that Marco Antonio Barrera and some of these other fighters that they compared to, that they're not the greatest of all time. So if they can trick the public into thinking once again that they're below those guys of the current generation will never be a serious threat to the greatest of all time conversation, because that's what their worst nightmare is.
So I remember these moments. When he fought John McDermott, you can go look at it. He has interviews where he said Tyson Fury, he hit him with a punch or a jab or something, and Tyson Fury eyes rolled in the back of his head. He also got dropped by a cruiserweight, turned heavyweight in Steve Cunningham when he came to New York. So Fury has had spotty performances, but because he was able...
Right, and, you know, so that means once again that he's not a great fighter. Right, so what that means is that Juan Manuel Marquez, when it comes down to it, Gervonta Tank Davis, who of course has never been knocked down but not had great performances over Rolly Romero, Hector Garcia, you know, Mario Barrios, you know, what that means is that none of those guys can be remembered as great fighters. Is that correct? That just doesn't make any damn sense.
To beat Wilder, and I really, me personally, I don't really believe the Wilder I don't think everything was on the up and up. I don't know what he did.
Of course you don't. Of course you don't, because you're a dude once again that treated Deontay Wilder like he was a pro black god, and you overall were hoping that Wilder was going to beat Tyson Fury. Remember, these were the same guys that said that Deontay Wilder, that if he beat Tyson Fury, that he was going to be top 10 of all time in the heavyweight discussion, and that he would have knocked out Mike Tyson, all sort of stuff. But now that Tyson Fury is on top of the heavyweight division, he wouldn't have defeated anyone from the 90s or any of the other eras. He's just fighting in a watered down to all this sort of bullshit.
I don't know if he was doing on something banned, and he just didn't get caught. Because just because you don't get caught don't mean
right. But that's not really what you're talking about, Eagle. What you're talking about, have courage overall in what you're saying. What you're talking about is the glove gate. All right, that's what you're talking about, which has been debunked by anyone who has an ounce of intelligence and knows shit about boxing. But it's a bit hard for Ego.
you're not on something. I think we all know that. Because it's like Antonio Margarito. Does anyone believe that he did the plaster of Paris illegal raps and he only did it for Cotto?
Right, but once again, Tyson Fury and that glove gate bullshit has already been debunked. Because the thing is about Antonio Margarito is that he was caught red-handed by officials. And the thing is about Tyson Fury, even if you wanted to allege that, the officials were in on it, all sort of bullshit, when it came down to it, even Deontay Wilder doesn't believe that those gloves were tampered with, because he would have got rid of JD's if he believed that those gloves were tampered with. Period.
And he only did it for Mosley, and he had never tried it before? Or was he doing it throughout his career, and that's when he got caught in the Mosley fight? Rest in peace to brother Nassim.
Right, and, that's an accurate point when it comes to Antonio Margarito. The problem is with Tyson Fury is that when it comes to the glove gate bullshit, he's never been caught red-handed cheating with his gloves. Now to these pro-blackity blacks, when it comes down to it, he's been caught cheating red-handed with their gloves because that's what they want to believe.
Richardson. So all in all, Tyson Fury, he's been hit or miss. I think his chin is definitely shown some degradation and is not as solid as before. And maybe it was never.
I just think that Tyson Fury's chin, I just think it's like a one-minute Will Marquez chin. He's a guy that can't get knocked down. He's not a guy that has a Gennady Golovkin or Canelo Alvarez type of chin. He's not a guy that, it takes a semi-truck to knock him down. But at the end of the day, he always gets back up and he performs stronger and he can recover well from punches. And that's, the most important aspects.
The best. I truly think Tyson Fury, he can box. He's pretty fast. And his size.
He's an excellent boxer. Tyson Fury at his best is an exceptional boxer. Now, if you want to talk about his size certainly is a component of it. There's no doubt about it. The fact that he's 6'9", 280 pounds at times with an 85-inch arm reach, of course that's a part of it. That's going to be a part of it, especially when you're that size. But Tyson Fury would have not been able to outperform Klitschko and Wilder and some of the other fighters in his career if it was just size alone.
That's what gives him the most advantage. If Tyson Fury was like 6'2.5".
The thing that gives Tyson Fury overall a great edge is that Tyson Fury, not only does he have great size, but combined with his great size, he is an exceptional fighter, and he's the most skilled and the most intelligent heavyweight fighter of his era, which is pretty much like the John Jones of boxing. Like John Jones, he has a great reach advantage and height advantage over most of his opponents. But it's not just because of that he wins fights.
6'3", I don't think he'd be that great. Part of his package.
Right, but what does that really say? And then people can talk all that shit all they want to, but what does that really say? Like, people always mention these stupid ass points when it comes down to about, like, what do you think Terrence Crawford or these guys would do if they went up to the heavyweight division? Do you think that they would stand a chance? Well, it's like what type of a dumbass question is that? Like, if you take a look at Muhammad Ali's fights, tell me overall that he looks all around as skilled as what Floyd Mayweather Jr. does in some of his fights. That's like me saying stupid shit like, oh, well, what would happen if Mayweather and Muhammad Ali were in the same weight division? What would happen overall if Deontay Wilder was 5'9", competing at 154? Like, what are you talking about? Because once again, certain fighters, when it comes down to it, they perform differently when they're heavier, and they perform differently when they're lighter. That's just how it is.
Pause. Part of the package that he brings is that he's big, and he's bigger than most of his opponent. And I
He's bigger than most of his opponents, but he's defeated certain guys that somewhat also have his same physical dimensions. Now, if he was like a Vladimir Klitschko, where he was beating nothing but drunken, fat, beer belly midgets throughout his whole entire career, throughout the majority of that decade, then I would kind of understand. Or people way shorter than him, then I would understand. But Fury hasn't done that throughout his whole entire career. Wilder was a 6'7", great all-time great power puncher with an 80-something-inch arm reach. Vladimir Klitschko was around 6'6", 6'7", great boxing skill, great punches, great power punching, and he was able to embarrass both of them. So let's not just say that, oh, Fury's only great because of his size, because that doesn't make any sense. Fury is an exceptional boxer.
think that's what gives him the advantage. He feints a lot, moves a lot, and he's awkward, and he'll snake charm you. But it's starting to show more.
Well, the thing is that Tyson Fury does well is that he does basically about everything well when he's at his best. But of course, the Francis Ngannou fight, it did show some of the flaws that he did have, some of the few flaws that he did have once again, which is that sometimes he backs up in a straight line, too much, and at times he keeps his hands down a little bit too much when he's inside the range or after he throws a punch. So he needs to be careful.
More and more that he's susceptible. Let me know what you guys think. Is Tyson Fury's chin decimated after fighting Wilder? And I'm so sick of hearing Tyson Fury fans in the comment section say that, oh, he didn't prepare for Ngannou. I mean,
well, he prepared for Ngannou. He just probably didn't prepare for him as as much as what he did for other fights, which, of course, logically, why would you? Why would you want to put, as much wear and tear in your body in training overall, for a fighter that you think is pretty much going to be a pushover, And even Ego believes that he stated that Fury, that he probably did not train as hard and that he probably underestimated him. Now, would I say that Fury didn't train for him? I'm not going to say they didn't train for him, but it certainly was not the best version of Fury that I've ever seen.
No matter what you do, that doesn't uplift your fighter. That doesn't make Fury look better. It's your fault if you're fighting a nefarious UFC puncher and you're saying it's a big fight and a crossover fight and you're putting it on pay-per-view and you don't prepare for your fight like you should because you underestimate him, then you're just a fool. So why would I?
Agreed. You should keep that same standard when it comes to Errol Spence Jr. If you're staying at the 147-pound weight division and you're truly that weight drained, like Ego keeps making that bullshit excuse when it comes down to it. If you're clearly that weight drained, move the fuck up. But you notice once again that Ego isn't telling Errol Spence fans stop making excuses. Probably because he's the king of the Errol Spence, fan bitch boy club. And that's not me insulting Errol Spence fans or anything like that. But Ego, once again, he has no problem whatsoever making excuses for his favorite fighters. But boy, when it comes to the fighters that he don't like Canelo and Fury, there's no excuses.
Even if you say he didn't prepare, which is not what Fury's saying. Fury said he trained hard and had a tough camp that lasted 12 weeks.
Well, Fury, I think, trained consistently. But do I think that, once again, he trained as intelligently or intensely for Ngannou? No. and Fury can say that all he wants to, but ain't no way you're going to sit here and tell me that he had as tough of a training camp for that of Francis Ngannou and that he took him that massively seriously and he had the Oleksandr Usyk fight a month and a half later. That makes no damn sense.
Even if you say he was ill-prepared, I mean, that's his fault. It's if you go to the Super Bowl and you stayed up all night drinking and you're playing as quarterback in the Super Bowl the next day, that's your problem. Drop your thoughts in the comment section.
I agree, Mr. Eagle. Once again, you should keep that same standard when it comes to your boy Errol Spence Jr. and stop making those bitch-ass excuses. But it is what it is. And credit to that of Errol Spence Jr. because I have not heard him make one excuse for the Terrence Bud Crawford fight. Great job on him. But anyways, just thought that I would review that video. We're going to review a second video now. But once again, it goes to show you that these guys that, they will try to tear down these fighters, off of anything. So it is what it is, and they're trying to debunk their whole career. That's basically what they're trying to do, But if Fury, once again, if he's able to come back and be dominant against that of Oleksandr Usyk or even win against him, this is pretty much going to go away. So it is what it is, but we'll see. And of course, that's a big if because, Usyk is no joke. He certainly is a great fighter. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. For this video, let's now go into part 2. Okay, so this is going to be part 2 of this video. And this is going to be a video by that of Dante's Boxing Nation. And as you notice here, you guys, that are smart enough can probably already tell what the pattern is here. And this was posted a few days ago. Of course, you see that of Tyson Fury, you see Usyk, and you see that of Tommy Fury. Now, what basically is the connotation here? What basically is he trying to allege? Basically, what Dante and a lot of these LDBC and new media boys, basically what they try to allege is that these guys that, the fix is always in when it comes to these fighters, and they basically want you always to believe that these fighters are more hype and more bullshit than what they are substance. And that's why they always try to allege that Fury, that he robbed Ngannou, Oleksandr Usyk, that it really was a legitimate punch, and they robbed Daniel Dubois. Tommy Fury really lost against KSI. All this are bullshit, And I'm not saying that some of these calls could have not been 50-50. If you thought Ngannou won against Fury, that's your prerogative. I personally gave it to Fury. It was a very close fight. If you thought that the Usyk punch, that Daniel Dubois landed, was a legitimate blow, that's up to you. It was borderline, in my view, low, borderline legal. Now the only one out of all three of these that I would say that I would probably not agree with completely is the Tommy Fury versus KSI fight, because KSI won the first 2 rounds of that fight, and he didn't do shit for the latter part of that fight. But it is what it is. But this is what these channels love to do, and this is why I always love to point it out. Once again, because they're not here for logic and objectivity. They're here to make sure that the black fighters, that they keep the mantle overall for the best fighters in boxing. And for the majority of the time, they certainly have that mantle, because black American fighters especially, they've usually been the best, the most skilled, and the most dominant fighters in that of the sport. But anytime there looks like there's a fighter that might be a possible threat to that #1 pound-for-pound spot, whether it be Lomachenko, Golovkin, Kovalev, Fury, Usyk, Inoue, Canelo, Tyson, Fury, any one of those guys, they will attack them, and they'll attack them unbearably until they can try and convince the public to say, see, we were always right about this fighter. And they're going to do that with Tyson Fury until Tyson proves, and it's a big maybe, if he can beat Oleksandr Usyk. So we'll see about that. But anyways, let's get into the video. Let's see what Mr. Dante has to say.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So it's not surprising when it comes to the sport of boxing, the words controversy and boxing are synonymous. There have been...
And let me tell you what, when you talk about controversy is the Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury first fight. Controversy is Araceli Lara versus Paul Williams. Controversy is Chavez Sr. versus Pernell Sweepy Whitaker. That's what actual controversy is. A controversy is not a fight that could go either way, or a punch that looks like it either could have been a little bit low or borderline legal. You can't call any of those things controversial. But you notice once again that they never say that the Andre Ward decision over Kovalev was controversial, even though many people would say that it is. Would I agree with that? I'm not going to say it was controversial, because it was a fight that could have went either way. And I'm not a person that says that if a fight that can go either way, you can't really say that the decision was controversial, because if a fight can clearly go either way, then it's basically up to the judge's subjectiveness at that point to what they favor, and I don't really have a huge problem with that. Also, you notice that there's no Devin Haney versus Lomachenko fight on here, which I also did not have a huge problem with that decision either, but many of the world also said that it was controversial. Notice that that fight is not on here.
3 fights that have ended in controversy this year that stood out the most. And the reason why they stood out the most is because the professional boxing experts are the ones that came out and called foul play, said there was a robbery, said the wrong guy got the decision. It's always...
Just as many people said with Vasily Lomachenko and Devin Haney, but you notice, once again, that's not on here.
Completely different when professional boxing...
And the reason why so many people said that the KSI versus Tommy Fury fight in the Francis Ngannou versus Tyson Fury fight was controversial is because, once again, a lot of people, when it looks like an upset is about to happen, basically it's about to make their week, it's about to make their day, when it comes down to it, because it's something to get excited about, it's something to talk about, it's something to remember for their generation, something that they can tell people. So when it looks like that upset is about to happen, but then it doesn't end up happening, once again, it's basically like a crackhead that gets very, very close to the high but doesn't end up getting the high. So now they're pretty much pissed off and bitter. And then, they're overall very, very angry.
Are coming out, and they're the ones that are protesting the decision Because professional boxers don't usually have an agenda when they tell you who they thought won the fight, at least the majority of them. I'm not saying all of them. With that being said, there were 3 fights in particular that ended in controversy. In all 3 of these fights, there was a massive favorite that was expected to win. And in all 3 of those fights, the majority of the boxing experts felt the wrong guy got the decision. Let's talk about the 3 fights.
And once again, you cannot rely on what most people say, even quote-unquote boxing experts, because most people, once again, lead with their emotions or what they want to happen, not with what actually happened.
It was Tyson Fury versus Francis Ngannou. It was KSI versus Tommy Fury. And it was Oleksandr Usyk versus Daniel Dubois. Now, let's first talk about KSI versus Tommy Fury. What obviously makes that fight significant, there's a couple things that makes that fight significant. One is the fact that Tommy Fury is Tyson Fury's little brother. And number 2, you had a professional boxer in Tommy Fury fighting against an influencer in KSI.
If you ask me, and I think you just did, I'm going to give this to KSI. I think it was 3-3, but you take the point deduction, I think KSI wins the fight.
I think I may agree with you, and that is hard to believe.
That right there was DAZN's commentary team. And let me tell you something. When you have DAZN's commentary team admitting that they believe Tyson Fury's brother not only lost to a YouTuber, but lost to a black YouTuber, and they still admit that they felt Tommy Fury lost the fight, that's when you know for sure it's a robbery. Now, what makes that whole...
Yes, because DAZN, they've been so racist against their black fighters, especially that of KSI, someone that they can use as a major asset, and someone that they gave the decision to over that of Logan Paul. Yes, KSI has been through the ringer. Like, get the fuck out of here.
Situation so ironic is after Tommy Fury won the fight, even Tyson Fury and his father said that they would have had no problems if they would have gave the decision to KSI. That right there tells me that if they were not related to Tommy Fury, they would have easily came out and said, I thought KSI won the fight. Just like the majority.
Right, but once again, if you watch that fight, anyone who actually knows how to score a boxing fight, KSI did not end up winning that fight. He clearly won the first 2 rounds, and then after that, he clearly slowed down. He had a very one-dimensional style of boxing, and he can complain about getting robbed, and people can complain about him getting robbed, all this other bullshit. And not only was it not a robbery, but Tommy Fury clearly won the final 4 rounds.
Other professional boxers said when they...
And once again, if you want KSI to win that fight, maybe you should tell KSI to throw more than just a right hand from that of 17 feet away.
Did their interviews and reacted to the decision. You know, speaking of that fight with KSI and Tommy Fury, I remember Tyson Fury was there. They interviewed him and gave him a chance to promote his fight with Francis Ngannou. Who would have thought that Tyson Fury would end up pretty much in the same situation his little brother was in, but a lot worse, because Tyson Fury was supposed to be the best heavyweight in the division. And all of a sudden he's fighting.
Well, Tyson Fury is the best heavyweight in the division because there's no other fighter to compare to him. I mean, unless you're talking about Oleksandr Usyk, but I just don't think Usyk has defeated enough heavyweights, to claim him as the best heavyweight of that division.
Against a guy.
And you notice that a lot of these people that they say, they call Tyson Fury, the so-called champion. They call him overall the supposed best heavyweight in the division. These guys are so bitter that their boy Deontay Wilder ended up getting defeated against Tyson Fury. They're still not over it. They're still so depressed about that fight.
That doesn't have one single amateur or professional fight going into that fight. And he ended up doing worse than his brother Tommy Fury did against KSI, getting knocked down against Francis Ngannou. Now that brings us to the Oleksandr Usyk versus Daniel Dubois fight. More controversy. In this fight,
there really wasn't any controversy if you know shit about boxing. Now, there's a lot of people, once again, that would say that that's a legal blow. There's a lot of people that would also say that that was an illegal blow. In my personal view, that's an illegal blow. It is what it is. When you talk about it covering the complete belt line and that punch is, possibly touching even a slight part of the trunks, the bottom part of the trunks, that in my view is a little bit low because a punch should not really be touching that part of the trunks. And either way, even if you thought that that was a punch that was legal, it's not like it was clear as day. If the punch was a punch that landed on the top portion of the trunks, and landed on the top half of the belt line, then I kind of get it. But if you're talking about a punch that landed even a little bit possibly on the bottom part of the trunks, like, what are you complaining about controversy and that, oh, he got robbed? You know, if you're to, once again, and I always state this, if you're doing something and if there's something that is borderline when it comes down to it, you know, you can't complain about a robbery. You know, you can't complain about that person or you getting robbed because it's a call that could go either way. You know, it is what it is.
Oleksandr Usyk, he gets caught with a perfect body shot that drops him to the ground. Usyk tried to act like it was a low blow, and the referee, he
Because it was.
ruled it as a low blow. What's so funny about that situation is Usyk has been knocked down with body shots previously in other fights, and in those fights, he did the exact same thing. He tried to react as if it was a low blow, but in that fight, the referee, he ruled it as a knockdown. If that body shot that Usyk landed would have been ruled a knockdown, there's a very good chance Usyk would not have made the count and he would have been knocked.
And once again, this was their main objective. Because with every fighter like this, Usyk, Fury, Canelo, there's always some controversy tied behind their name. There's always something that leads to them not being raised above a certain level. Well, we can't compare Canelo to that of Oscar De La Hoya or Marquez or Chavez, you know, because he really shouldn't have beat, you know, Gennady Golovkin, even though De La Hoya also had his fair share of controversial decisions, including like that of Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker, where that was a fight that could have went either way, and a lot of people believe Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker should have won. You know, there's a lot of people that believe that he lost to, I believe, that one African fighter. I forget his name. You know, whatever the hell that dude's name was. I Corte, I believe. You know, and there's a couple of other decisions. Chavez, of course, we all know the decision over Sweet Pea Pernell Whitaker. So once again, you know, their standards just doesn't make any sense.
Out. So if there was a different referee working that fight, we would have had a new heavyweight champion that night. And the same thing can be said about the judges that scored that fight between Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou. So it's pretty crazy when you think about it, because now we're going to have the two heavyweight champions fighting against each other possibly next year when both of them should have lost their last fight. At least that's what the majority of the experts believe.
No, that's not what the majority of the experts believe. That's what the majority of idiots believe, once again, because most people don't know shit about boxing and they don't know how to not get their emotions involved. Even certain analysts and even certain professional athletes. All right? Now, once again, you know, if you were to ask most, you know, boxers, they would probably say that they thought Lomachenko won the Devin Haney fight. But once again, notice that fight is not on here. But, you know, I don't mind it because, once again, you can't always go by what the average person says or what by most people say. You have to watch the fight for yourself. You have to be logical. You have to be objective. But this is pretty much perfect for Dante, you know, because now they can allege that Fury versus Usyk, that it's pretty much a battle of the big white hypes, you know, and whoever wins the fight, it's not going to matter anyway because they've been protected by that of old media, all sort of bullshit. So that's the thing that they're going to try and pretty much put out there.
Fact that people have seen all of this play out with their own eyes, it definitely hurts the buildup of a fight between Tyson Fury and Usyk. With that being said, I'm going to wrap this video up. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
But anyways, that's pretty much about it, you know. But once again, everything that I said was going to happen, happened, and everything that the LDBC and new media that they were trying to allege, I got it right on the button. You know, it is what it is. Because once again, they are a pro-black cult. They're very envious and they're very bitter. You know, but it is what it is. Anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see where this fight goes. From what I hear, the Fury versus Usyk fight is going to happen in that of February, which I think is pretty much the perfect date for it. And whoever wins that fight, you know, they're certainly going to be remembered as one of the all-time greats, no doubt about it. You know, in my view, who would I favor in that fight? I would favor Tyson Fury. At least the best version of Tyson Fury, which I would expect nonetheless in that fight, especially ever since, you know, he damn near suffered a loss against Francis Ngannou. I expect Fury to be better in the Usyk fight and for this to be a little bit of a wake-up call. But we'll see. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.